Today we've got questions on the social kingship of Christ, the pro-life movement, and does Charles need to hand in his boomer pop culture card? Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a sagacious Charles Coulombe.
Sagacious.
Sagacious, yes.
Sagacious. So I'm the wise old man of the woods, huh?
Yeah,
the old man of the mountain.
The old man on the mountain.
Oh, I see. The guru with the mumu or something.
Something
like that. Well, all right. I guess I can
Yeah.
pass for sagacious. Not salacious.
You're not salacious.
You sure?
I'm pretty sure you're not salacious.
All right.
I don't want you to be salacious, Charles.
Well, that's
That'd
good.
be weird. Yeah, that'd be pretty weird. So
I would think so. Like you're in I don't know, inbreeding jokes.
Is that salacious?
They can be if they're too detailed.
I don't think okay. I mean, obviously you're not against inbreeding jokes per se.
Well, no, as long as they're not crude.
Yeah.
I mean, things like, how do you know if you're from West Virginia or, the Appalachians or any other, Winchester, New Hampshire, any other inbreeding capital you want to come from. How do you know if you're from there? You yourself are from there.
I'm not from West Virginia, no.
Well, you know how you would know if you were?
Oh, how?
Your family tree would have no branches. Straight as a telephone pole. Uncle
That's
Dad.
pretty bad.
Uncle Dad, naughty mom.
Uncle Dad.
But it's not salacious, is it?
I don't think I would qualify that as salacious.
Would you qualify it as sagacious?
Not necessarily sagacious. Well, I mean, maybe if you roll it up into some sort of proverb, then yeah.
They had to close the state library in West Virginia.
Why?
Somebody stole the book.
Somebody stole the book? They had one book?
Yeah. So they had to close it. Actually, I shouldn't bag on West Virginia. It's a very nice state. And it's almost heaven, I'm told.
It's almost what?
Heaven.
It's almost heaven. West Virginia Country Road?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. See, you're a little bit of boomer wisdom is rubbing off on you. That's good. You may have to take it over when I die as the last boomer. You may have to take on that whole thing, open up a head shop when Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco gets turned to like a Colonial Williamsburg for the 60s. You'll open up a head shop there at the corner of Haight and you'll have the flowered shapeless garment, the serape, and you have flowers in your hair. You'll be rocking out to Scott McKenzie. If you're going to San Francisco, you'll get rid of this whole corporate life. You see, you'll get back to what matters, which was the weird fantasies of my older brothers, half of the generation, when they were at their adolescent heat.
What fantasies?
Physical fantasies.
Physical fantasies. Okay, so and that's the reality that matters.
It was reality to them then.
Yeah.
And now that they're in power, it's reality they try to force the rest of us to have too. I mean, if you think about it, everything they've done to marriage and family over the past 50 years has been an attempt to make concrete those fantasies of the summer of love.
That's very true. Do you think these younger generations will fix it, or is it just they're just some sort of diluted version of that generation in that sense?
Well, I think what'll probably happen, I don't know, but I think what'll probably happen is that because these things, shall we say, carry the seeds of their own destruction, one generation, maybe not one born yet, will get sick and tired of being scrammed into the mud and will rediscover why people generally speaking, have done these things. I mean, it took generations for the people of Carthage to figure out that sacrificing infants to the gods was not going to protect them. And you know what it was that showed them that?
What, Rome put him in the dirt? What?
Yeah, yeah. Rome utterly destroying the city and then plowing it over with salt.
Yeah.
And the surviving Carthaginians looked at that and said, you know, you think maybe baby sacrifice doesn't work? I'm just asking. Putting it out there. I'm not saying, just saying.
Yeah. I'm in favor of that, but I think we're underestimating. We don't have the imagination of how bad the road downward has to be in order to finally hit the road upward.
Well, no, I agree with you. That's what I tell you. I can't say when or how this will happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, as we said earlier, in the pre-show, if Mr. Trump's beliefs are correct, and this is a country where you have to believe in infanticide to get elected, if that's true, then this is a country like Carthage, and it will only understand reality when it gets its face rammed real good and real hard into it. And that's one thing I'd rather not see. And you know why I'd rather not see it?
Why?
Because if I were a Carthaginian, no matter how much I might have disliked baby murder as a religious rite, I don't think I would have enjoyed seeing the Romans destroying my city and plowing it over with salt and murdering 3/4 of my fellow citizens, presuming they didn't. If they killed me too, I wouldn't appreciate that either.
Right.
So you look at all these things, and all you can say is everything is beautiful in its own way.
Well, isn't that relativistic?
No, I don't think so. Inbreeding covers a multitude of sins.
Go on.
No. No, I'm just tossing it out there. I'm just tossing it out there. See, as a French Canadian, myself from the shallow end of the gene pool, I have a right to speak about these things.
You know, the thing where you said everything is beautiful, everything is beautiful regardless of what happens or whatever. There's actually, I keep doing these religious readings where actually it kind of says that in a different way, where it's regardless of what happens, God is glorified.
Yes.
Where, like, if the worst of stuff happens, that glorifies his mercy or his justice, or, right?
This is
Which
very
I thought
true.
was interesting.
Well, I mean, and it's very true. All kidding aside, much as I hate to, the truth of the matter is that we go along with his will or we don't. If we go along with it, then wonderful things will happen in this world or the next, which will glorify him. If we refuse, then, how do I put this? The inherent goodness, remember, evil is not as such a positive thing. It's an absence of good. So, when you push away the good that comes from following God's will, and are assailed with a ton of evils in response, that too is a glorification of God's will, because it shows how wonderful God's will is. Had you followed it, you wouldn't have had all these terrible things happen. You didn't, you wouldn't, so, all right, now you get to find out what it's like without it. To put this another way, you never appreciate food so much as when you're starving.
Yeah.
And in a certain sense, the food, glorious food, is more glorious to the starving man than it is to the glutton like myself, waddling out of his favorite restaurant.
Very true. Yeah, so that's a certain thing, because the other thing that really helps me personally, ladies and gentlemen, is something Father Ripperger said, which is in terms of purging our attachment to things that can lead us to sin or anger or whatever. And I remember he said that might even mean purging your attachment to the concept of having a healthy church. If that leads you to...
If you're willing to do the wrong thing for the sake of a healthy church,
yes,
then that is certainly something you need to lose.
Yeah.
And it's the same, dare I say it, for any good end that you seek that requires evil to attain. So, for instance, I love the United States of America. But if I were to gain an advantage for my country that would cause half the people of Mexico to die, but the States would be in great shape, that would be evil.
Yeah.
And I could say, well, yeah, but, you know, the States will be much better off.
Mm.
Yeah, but half the Mexicans will be dead. And that's still wrong.
Yeah.
And that, too, is something that it's haunting me during this election when we're trying to figure out who and what and how to do and who and with what. You know, my attachment to my country, on the one hand, should not be attached to the nature of its leadership. But on the other hand, at what point does my rightful obedience to the state turn into cooperation with evil when the state is run by evil men? And these are problems not just for Americans. I mean, they've come up at different times throughout history.
Yeah.
Doubtless that'll never happen to us here, because this is the best of all possible worlds. And everything is wonderful.
I think that's a song from the Lego movie.
No.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
It's
okay.
the Twilight Zone theme.
Oh, okay. Twilight Zone. Actually, I think it's Everything is Awesome. Sorry. Everything is Awesome.
Ray Stevens saying Everything is Beautiful.
Yes. Yes. We've got a question about this. Terry,
Okay.
not a question, but a comment. So Michael says, I'm concerned about Charles. Last episode, he confused the King sisters, who did not appear on the Lawrence Welk show, with the Lennon sisters, who did. Then he attributed the song This Diamond Ring to Gary U.S. Bonds, rather than Gary, son of Jerry, Lewis, and the Playboys.
Oh, yeah.
Now he's mixed up Cat Stevens with Ray Everything is Beautiful Stevens. As someone who's even more of a geezer by 3 years than Sir Charles, I find this distressing. I fear it may eventually lead to the suspension of his boomer pop culture card.
No!
And it's so difficult to get one reinstated these days.
I'll say.
What with bureaucracy, red tape, and all.
And the other boomers dying off. There are only so many qualified to give you the certificate.
That being said, he still knocks these references out of the park most of the time, so there is hope. God bless.
Oh, boy.
Boomers helping boomers.
It's a beautiful thing. Boomers helping boomers.
Well, what's that line? That reminds me of that line from the movie, the Christmas, what is it? The book, Your Generation Takes a Long Hard Look at Itself.
Oh, that was from Berkeley in the 60s.
Yeah,
it was the left, but it means the boomers in this case. Takes a good, long, hard look at itself and likes what it sees. Well, you know, it's true. We were cool a long time ago. And now we hate everything that's young. I mean, and now we want everything to be young like us.
Forever young.
Yeah.
Forever young. Rod Stewart.
Sha la 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 la, live for today. And don't worry about tomorrow. You know, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it pays to gnaw through the straps in the morning. It really does.
Yeah, well, since we're going to cite our friend's bumper stickers, my favorite is no restraining order can stop my love.
Can hold back my love.
Can hold back my love,
That's true. That's true. And she also has buckle up. It makes it harder for the aliens to suck you out of your car.
That's good.
So,
So he's pointing at Helvetia, who he wants to talk about. He says, I think that Charles got defensive about feeding ghosts because French Canadians do it too. I believe this happens on the Feast of St. John the Baptist. Hungry ghosts eat both French and Chinese.
Not the Feast of St. John the Baptist. All Saints' Night, the Eve of All Souls. That's when we have the Dîner des Morts, the Dinner of the Dead.
What do you do? What do you serve them?
Their favorite foods.
Each individual's favorite foods?
Yeah. Well, often they have the same, but yeah. So, when, just to give you an example, the way it would normally have worked back in the bad old days is not All Saints' Night, you would go to the cemetery and you would light candles and that sort of thing. And then they would have the solemn Vespers of All Saints, the second Vespers.
Mm-hmm.
And that would immediately switch to the Vespers for the dead. And then you would go home, and you would set the Dîner des Morts with all your dead relations' favorite foods, and then you go to bed. And in the morning, you'd give the food to the poor, and you did the 7 days of the novena, the first 9 days of November, of the octave, I guess, visiting the cemetery. Some people would do it every day in November. And it was the time of the spirits, and the whole month of November was considered the time when they might return. Yeah. Having been born on the octave of All Saints myself, not that we're saying anything about it, but it was on the octave of All Saints that Richard Nixon was defeated for the presidency of the United States.
Yes.
You seem unimpressed.
Yes.
Okay, well, never mind. But no, so yeah, it is true. We do but a lot of cultures do. I mean, not just the Mexicans, but a lot of different Spanish-speaking peoples do a Dinner of the Dead sort of thing. And there are all sorts of ghost stories about what happens if you eat the food, or if the fellow was very, very hungry. One night he was a beggar. And he was walking through this seemingly deserted French Canadian village. He was English. And everybody was in bed apparently, and yet all the lights were on in all the houses. Not all the lights, but in their main room. Yeah. So he didn't know what was going on, and he looked in one window, and there was a whole table set for 10 with 9 people, and they're all eating and chatting, looking very happy. So he goes in, and they stop talking, and they all look at him. And he says, "May I join you?" in English, because he doesn't speak French. And so the oldest man at the table nodded and pointed to the empty chair. And he sat down, and he had the first full meal he'd had in a very long time. He ate everything, and they kept, giving him food, doling it out to him. In the morning, the family came to the table, and to their shock, all the chairs, of course, were empty, except for the one corpse sitting by himself.
He was the corpse and they weren't I thought it was going to be reverse.
No, he died. They were ghosts, but he died. He ate the food of the dead.
Oh. Well, they killed him then. That patriarchal ghost said, "Eat the food."
Or he was already on his way out. We don't really know. It might be that he was going to die anyway.
Shows the French animosity toward the British.
No, it's love.
Say,
It's love. You remember how Rudyard Kipling wrote about how the French Canadians
so
are
this
people
is
of love?
excuse me. So this is Charles Coulombe promoting mercy killings. Oh, he was on his way out anyway. Oh, he was on his way out anyway.
Yes, he was on his last
So go
leg.
ahead and just eat the
Just
food of
gave
the
a
dead
quick push.
and give him a quick push.
They gave a quick push. It was
Wow.
It was painless.
Wow.
He died happy.
Well, you're so disingenuous.
He died happy. It was the first full meal he'd had in months.
Well, then, I guess he can go ahead and die.
One of his English...
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Soylent Green, the way they killed Edward G. Robinson.
It would have been more like if Edward G. Robinson had been lying on the table as the main course with an apple in his mouth. Now that would have been something. Edward G. Robinson and all the Fixins for your holiday meal. Oh, man. You know, you can keep your turkey and your chicken. We got us Edward G. Robinson this year. Is that in poor taste? I'm not sure. You know, if there was censorship in these things, I'm afraid we'd be manhandled by the network.
That's very true.
All right, you know, we apologize to any Edward G. Robinson fans out there, and we assure you that no real Edward G. Robinsons were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yes.
All right, what else we got?
All right. Okay. So, we're gonna have to transition to a more somber note. Arguably the biggest super fan of the show, and that's saying a lot, actually. Chris, I'll just leave it Chris for privacy reasons, but his dad died.
Yes, his father died. John is the father's name, after being in hospice for quite a long time, quite a number of months. And so he has asked for prayers from Don Vincenzo, myself, Bill Biersack, you know, the usual suspects. And we would also ask you to pray for John, the father of the patron. You know, it's always a hard thing, ladies and gentlemen, that you lose your father, as both of us can attest. Our heart goes out to you at this time, Christopher. And all I can say is that it does get better. It never goes away. It just becomes part of everything else. No, it doesn't make sense to you now, but it will. It becomes a part of everything, just like a tooth that's been pulled out.
Okay, I guess.
No, I mean, it's there. It's always, when you... when something happens and your first thought is, I want to tell Dad.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And then you're reminded.
Yeah, it hits you. It hits you in waves. You know, something creates that memory.
Yeah.
You know, but it's. Yeah, I remember when it happened. It's toughest pain, once in a lifetime pain.
Well, thank God for that. You know, you don't need more than that.
Yeah.
But what else we got?
Should we say?
Yes, of course.
Let's
in
do
the
it.
Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord.
And let perpetual light shine upon him.
May his soul, souls of all the faithful departed, to the mercy of God, rest in peace.
Amen.
Amen. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. And I guess there's a law for that, also for all of your own fathers and mothers and so on. Those of you who still have them, treasure them while you got them. You know, even if they're annoying, even if they're boomers like me, treasure them, because when they're gone, they are so gone.
Right. Let's talk about that a little bit, because you gave me really good advice. I think it's great advice for everyone. which is the three big things, which is to say to them is,
Yeah.
thank you, I love you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well,
Yeah.
I love you. I forgive you.
Oh, I
I'm
forgive.
sorry.
Okay.
Because anyone you love deeply will have hurt you very badly, and you'll have hurt them very badly.
Hmm.
It's the unfortunate nature of life. You can say something to me, and I go, whatever.
Yeah.
But if I love you very deeply, and you say the same thing,
Yeah.
it's like, oh God, because we consider the source. You say,
Yeah.
and because we're all fallen, we constantly trap on each other's toes, and so it's important before you part with someone from this life. It's important that they know that you loved them, that you do forgive them, and that you are so very sorry for what you did to them. Because I guarantee you, you have something to forgive, and so do they.
So I took this advice from my dad, well before he was, perhaps as you would say, circling the drain. But when I had said it to him, I figured, I didn't really need to say it to him because he already knew those things. And indeed, his reaction was pretty like, yeah, I know. Because we did love each other very much. I didn't need to say it in this thing. Like, it was just, like, implicit, like, both ways. But I think why it's important to say, if you feel you don't even need to say it, is to protect yourself for after he passes.
Exactly.
Because you're going to second guess yourself, like, oh, well, I didn't say this, or I didn't say that, or I didn't do this.
If only I told him.
Right. If only I told him. And even as it doesn't matter, I mean, because it's going to be irrational. So now I get to fall back on this. It's like, yeah, I told him, and it wasn't even like I didn't even need to, and I still second guess other things, but I don't second guess that.
No,
you know what I mean? Like,
and that's a very key thing.
Yeah.
Of course, there was the terrible thing that happened to my dad with his great aunt Imelda. She died in 1964.
Yeah.
About 3 days before the election. And the presidential election, Goldwater versus Johnson.
Yeah.
And as she lay dying, she said to my father, "Gee, vote for Goldwater, and you'll have a war in Southeast Asia." And she died. Well, Dad voted for Goldwater, and sure enough, we had a war in Southeast Asia. The prophecy came true.
The prophecy.
It did.
Is that a true story?
No.
Okay.
No, it's actually a very old joke.
Oh,
but it was my dad's joke. He always used to say, people told me if I voted for Goldwater, I'd get a war in Southeast Asia. So I voted for Goldwater, and I got a war in Southeast Asia.
There's no escaping.
No, it happened,
Oh, man. That's good. Yeah. So, any final thoughts on that?
No, I mean, these things, in the midst of life, we are in death. And I'm sure as we move through the autumn in particular, and then into November, the month of the Holy Souls, we'll have a lot more of this kind of thing to think about, to talk about. It is, the one thing I will say, though, is that moving into the autumn, as we are, September, the harvest time, it does, and especially if you're my age, you guys, most of you, according to the computer analysis, most of you folks are somewhere between 18 and 35.
Oh, yeah. Males.
Most.
Yes.
So, some few of you are old veterans, such as myself. But you do reach a time where you feel as though you're harvesting everything you sowed for good and for ill. You really, you've got more yesterdays than tomorrows. And you look back at your life and you wonder, did I do the best I could? Are the results any good? And of course, that's not really a question that can be answered this side of the grave, this side of the general judgment. We just don't. We don't have the means to do so. But I do believe that if you're generally happy with the course that your life has taken, and you're generally happy with what you're doing now, it's not so awful as when you aren't. And I think that's where a lot of our middle-aged crises come. I never had one, I never...
When do they pop in there?
It depends on the individual, obviously. We can be anywhere from 45 to 55. And basically, a number of things can start it off. The kids leave home. So remember, when you first get married, you wouldn't know that because you're not married, but, anyway, when you first get married, your life goes by in kind of a flash because you're busy doing stuff.
Yeah.
Constantly. And I think what probably happens is that when, in a certain sense, in a decade or two or three, you have the leisure now to stop and take stock. And you look around at you look at your wife, you look at your kids, you look at your house, you look at your job, you look at all this stuff. And you think either, well, this is great, or is this all there is? And that, I think, probably depends as much on you as it does on what your particular surroundings are. But what I do know is that if you're happy with what you see surrounding you, then you don't do any of the coulda, shoulda, woulda, because why would you?
Yeah.
Everything you did, even the stupid stuff, even the mistakes, even the failures, combined to take you where you are now.
Yeah.
And if anything had been different, you wouldn't be where you are now. You'd be doing, it'd be different, maybe better, maybe worse. But if you're happy with where you are, contrary-wise, if you're not, for whatever reason, But a lot of our discontent does come from a certain kind of self-delusion. So, as my father used to say, don't worry about what you don't have, enjoy what you've got. And I think that's very important.
Yeah.
If I'm looking, say, at my wife, presume I had one.
Yeah.
I look at her, and she's not the 10 she was when we got married, and her voice isn't as beautiful as it was when she was singing. Okay, how about you, pork chop? Are you still the young stud she married? Probably not. You're thinking, oh, that can't be. That'll never happen.
No, I'm actually thinking something entirely different.
Good.
Thinking because, no, actually, I can say this. I actually, it was a tangent, but I'm kind of a data guy. I'm kind of a digital marketing guy, so I look at nerd numbers, and I am able to see that people hit your page and people they're searching for Charles Coulombe wife.
Really?
Yeah. They're trying to see if you're available.
Poor Stella. It was August of 1914. The war had not yet been declared. That last summer, we vowed we'd never part. And then the war came. And then she looked at me and she said, "You're not going to be born until 1960. What are you even doing here?" True tragedy.
Alrighty, let us get some questions in here.
All right.
Jared has a really good question. He says, "Hello, I have a question for Charles regarding consumption of the Eucharist. I recently came across some people online talking about how you're not supposed to chew the host, but let it dissolve in your mouth. When Jesus says to eat my flesh, isn't this something translated as gnaw my flesh? I would think gnawing and chewing are the same thing. So is there any official teaching on this dissolve versus chew debate? Thank you and God bless."
I have to be honest. I don't know. I was always told, don't chew.
Right, yeah.
And even, with the Eastern rites, it's a bit different. Well, let me put it this way. If you receive in both kinds, either through the ordinariate or the Latin Rite or whatever, through intinction, the host is already beginning to dissolve anyway.
Mm.
The host by itself will dissolve after a while.
Yeah.
The Eastern Rite Eucharist is a little different because it's more substantial.
Yeah.
But even there, I mean, I have seen people chew it, but I don't know how they. Frankly, I don't know. All I know is what I was told, and what I was told is don't chew. But what that's based on, the answer to your question, I don't have. It's a very good one, and if anybody out there does have an answer, let us know about it.
Well, I think the intention is, actions. You want the actions to reflect the realities, the invisible realities, and I think so. I only heard this one place for me. That was St. Michael's Abbey, the Norbertines, in 1994. They said, "Don't chew like a cow, let it dissolve," and I think that was in an effort to sort of teach us to appreciate this experience, like what's actually happening. Like, this isn't a casual thing. This isn't normal food, so don't mistake it and engage with it like normal food. See, so I think by letting it dissolve, that's sort of an action that sort of reinforces, like, hey, this isn't a normal, like, I'm not putting chips in my mouth or something like this. This is,
and it allows you to pray as it's dissolving. Because our Lord himself, Lord of heaven and earth, is there on your tongue.
Yeah.
As the fathers say, you absorb him into you, he absorbs you into him.
Right.
And that bit of time you spend with him is the closest you can get to him this side of the grave.
I personally just let it dissolve. For again, my own personal just feeling of it is because I like the substance in my mouth because it feels close. Like it feels like the thing has not come and gone.
Right. It's
right.
I
want to savor.
You savor it. Yeah, that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Savor it. Now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. All right, Vendée Radio says, Dear Charles, please can you explain how Catholics serve in public office in the USA can take the oath to uphold the Constitution when the First Amendment is contrary to the social kingship of Christ? For the people who don't know, I mean, we have a international audience. What's the First Amendment?
The First Commandment. First Amendment.
Amendment, Charles.
The two are the same in our country. No, the First Amendment protects freedom of speech, freedom of religion, etc., etc. And the fact is that it has to be seen against the context that it was written. At that time, Catholicism had just become legal. And the reason why people like Pius VI and John Carroll signed off on it was that it was seen as a defense of Catholicism. Now, it's not an affirmation of the kingship of Christ, that's for sure. But it is an affirmation of the right of Catholics to preach and teach and evangelize. So, obviously, we failed. We didn't do that. We were too busy being accepted. But, nevertheless, that is why the authorities never had a problem with that oath. That is the Catholic authorities. Today, I mean, I had a problem with swearing the oath because when I swore it to go to the ROTC, it was the first time I swore it. I thought to myself, well, does this mean I'm defending abortion?
Mm.
And I really wrestled with my conscience. And my father, I asked him his advice. He'd been in the Second War. He was a tail gunner. And he said, well, you've got to apply the logic of that great theologian, Cab Calloway.
Who?
Cab Calloway.
Who's he?
He was a popular singer of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And he died. He died in 72, I think. But one of the roles he played was Sportin' Life in Porgy and Bess. And he has a song that goes, now he's really the devil.
Okay.
So the song goes, just a small part of it. It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, they ain't necessarily so. Methuselah lived 900 years. Methuselah lived 900 years. But who calls that living when no guy will give in to no guy what's 900 years? So he said, you've got to adopt the same attitude toward the Constitution that Cab Calloway does toward the Bible. It ain't necessarily so. Well, I mean, they're both Holy Writ. You know, and then my dad made the claim that Sportin' Life had actually been a Supreme Court justice as well as the devil.
Okay.
Because he could see things, you know, in the Constitution that ain't necessarily there.
All right. You know, speaking of social kingship of Christ, we got into an interesting discussion before the pre-show even.
Yeah.
Where we were talking about, because I forgot how I started it. It was some sort of mention of maybe I was talking about the neighbors not talking to each other, or there were a lot of like everybody. Do you remember how it started? I can't remember how it started, but I remember how it finished, which was.
See, you'll know better than we will.
The common good.
The common good.
Because your answer to me was all of this is happening because there is no common good.
Well, there's no idea of the common good.
No idea.
No shared belief in a common good.
Yeah.
And where this actually is applicable here is that the social kingship of Christ and its acceptance is the authentic common good, actually. The objectively real and true common good. What the Founding Fathers considered the common good was simply the bare minimum of security and justice required for life to continue.
Yeah.
Even that today is considered too radical.
Right.
So, you know, then you're a post-liberal or an integralist or whatever it is they're saying now.
Post-liberal?
Yeah, post-liberal. Or a LARPer.
Wait, I've never heard that before. So what is post-liberal? Like, that's...
Post-liberal, I mean, it's someone who's come to see that the liberalism under which the United States and the rest of the West function just doesn't work. So
okay.
He comes out from under it, as it were, and looks to find substitutes.
Okay.
And realistically speaking, there are differences between integralists and post-liberals and various other sorts of people we're talking about today. But personally, I don't really think they're that substantive.
Is post-liberal a word like anti-choice or right-wing? It's one of those types
All
of...
that.
Okay.
Look it up.
Okay.
It's, you know what? I'm willing to do this for you because that's the kind of guy I am. Let's see, post-liberal.
For people who want to read more about the social kingship of Christ and what that means and that concept, what are good resources for that?
Well, there are a lot of them. For starters, you want to read Pius XI's encyclical Quas Primas. You want to read, if you can find them, the writings of Father Huslein, Father, I can't think of his name, the Irishman.
Fahey?
That's the one.
That's right, yeah.
Father, then there was another Irishman writing at the same, Father Cahill.
Yes, framework of a Christian state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go, post-liberalism. As an alternative, post-liberals advocate a politics oriented towards the common good, seeking to balance individual rights with social responsibilities. Others focus on economic issues, critiquing the outcomes of liberal capitalism and proposing alternative models that are more regulated and socially embedded. So that's from Wikipedia, source of all knowledge.
Okay. All right. We've got another question. This one is from Love Muffin Knight.
Ah, well, there's a serious name.
Despite the many issues the church has been facing in these past decades, I noticed that the pro-life movement gets wide support, even to the point of overturning Roe v. Wade. I sometimes reflect on why the pro-life stance has had so much success when we are, by comparison, not particularly on fire to protect traditional marriage, testify to the real presence, evangelize non-believers, etc. Do either of you have thoughts on why the pro-life movement is special? What could we learn from the pro-life movement when combating other prevalent sins in our society and culture? Or am I wrong in thinking that pro-life is an exceptional case?
No, you're not. The thing is that Catholics, really American Catholics, Catholic Americans, never like going out on a limb by themselves for something that's only a Catholic issue.
Yes, definitely.
So the pro-life movement, which I'm not all in favor of, I'm against infanticide. I don't think murdering babies is good. I really don't. But this was something whereby we could participate with people of all faiths and none in upholding something that once upon a time was simply basic decency. You know. And we liked, it's the low-hanging fruit, basically.
Yeah.
It's the easy one. And to go after those other things would be to declare our sole identity. And Catholic Americans have never done that.
I mean, you're definitely right that one of the reasons is because it's beyond the Catholic thing. But if you just look at what you're defending, or what you're against, to me, the pro-life thing is the easiest selling point in a sense, because you're saying it's wrong to take a life as compared to have faith.
Well, that's true. Of course, now we know it doesn't matter. Now we know that if you want to be elected president, you got to get your hands red.
That's true.
Got to get them hands red with the blood of babes, or you won't be president of these United Snakes.
It's like, what's worse, like murder or piracy or something? Well, it's like, yeah.
You could be both. You could be a murderer and a pirate. You don't have to choose anymore.
So, yeah. So, I think that's one aspect.
In a certain sense, what's funny is that the apex of the pro-life movement, quote unquote, was probably the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We will not have a thing like that again.
One thing I have to say I like about the overturning of Roe v. Wade is it's that you don't know everything. Because
I never thought it would be.
You never thought, but you were basically that was the thing that.
Oh, I was absolutely assured that it would never go. But see, now, when you have the man responsible for it saying he would veto a federal abortion ban. Stop to think about that. If we were in a position to pass a right to life amendment, which not so long ago was a regular thing on the part of the Knights of Columbus, incidentally. Yeah, I know. I hate to bring up reality again. We're not supposed to remember this. But back when they wore funny costumes, and didn't look like the Royal Canadian Legion, back in those days, he would veto that.
Yeah.
At least if he's not lying.
Right.
But imagine if he isn't lying. It's one thing to lie and say you would do something good.
Yeah.
It's another thing to lie about doing something bad.
That's a good point. But doesn't it show perhaps
how rotten the people he wants to rule are? Yeah.
No. It's that the fate of America is not contingent on fallen men. God is in charge.
That's true. So when the volcanoes erupt in Yellowstone, and 2/3 of the country is blasted off into the atmosphere, bye! Or when we get a real COVID, when we get a real Black Plague, which none of us will take realistically until it's too late, because the governments of the world cried wolf. Oh, there are all kinds of good things that could happen. Now, mind you, I don't think the zombie apocalypse is one of them. You know the worst thing about the zombie apocalypse?
What?
It's when one of these things comes toward you going, brains, brains, and passes you by.
Well, I mean, one of the things, I actually roll with this metaphor, the zombie apocalypse metaphor, for real life constantly. I think I've actually said this on the show, right? Where the features of life our life in many sense reflects sort of the dynamic of, let's say, The Walking Dead, right? That's a show I watched where one of the things that happened as the show was going on more and more is sort of like the weak were dying off, right? Like you're just weak, and so you're going to die in this ruthless world.
And the survivors become ever more ruthless and nasty.
They have the strength, but they also have to. Yeah, correct. That's the other thing too. And so, in my opinion, we kind of see this in the Catholic sphere, right? Where it's like no holds barred kind of attitude, a little bit, kind of.
Yeah, except toward targets that are, it's easy to be no holds barred to someone who's weaker than you are.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I find really distasteful about a lot of the inter-trad Catholic feuds on the internet.
Yeah.
Is that it's not just that they're petty and silly.
Yeah.
It's that it's obvious to me that they're battered dwarf syndrome. We can't take on our masters because they're too big for us. So we prey on each other instead.
Yeah.
And, which is fine if you're a bully.
Yeah.
What if you aren't? I recently was kind of disturbed, and then a fellow I was talking with, who runs a chat room, he runs a chat room, and some person or other made it was all highly irrelevant stuff, but he starts beating up on this person who wasn't expressing himself very well. And I said, "What's that about?" And he said, "Oh, he's just some autistic kid." I said, "What?" I wrote this is all online.
Yeah.
What? Oh, yeah, well, when I feel pressured, I like to do that. I said, "How would you like being used that way?" As a punching bag. And it's just not, well, obviously not. And I said, well, I mean,
Yeah,
it's all stressful. Yeah, things are tough right now. But if the way you get relief from them is beating up on people weaker than yourself, jump out a window.
Yeah.
And see the ground at the end, it's not going to be weak. Your face, maybe a little weak.
Right.
We all of us are a complex of virtue and vice.
Right.
And especially in difficult times like these, or for that matter, even in triumphant times when we're faced, oddly enough, with the opposite set of temptations, and yet they're really very similar, we have to make sure that we do not succumb to our worst impulses. And the kind of third grade fighting you see amongst trads is a way of dealing with the pressure. I understand that. But it's battered dwarf syndrome. And the very fact, who with a brain would knowingly take on a bigger adversary than himself?
Nobody.
Nobody. So who are you going to pick a fight with?
Somebody is weak and wrong and you beat up?
Or who you think is.
Who you think, yeah.
Who you think is.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than a bully getting a fist to his face because he played with the wrong man.
Yeah.
Years ago, there was a song called Bad, Bad Leroy Brown.
I know it.
Remember?
Yeah.
And he goes on about, he's the baddest man in the whole downtown. Badder than old King Kong, madder than a junkyard dog. Well, he made a mistake. After all this reign of terror, he cast his eyes on the wife of a jealous man. The two men got to fighting and so on. When the whole thing was over, Leroy Brown looked like a jigsaw puzzle with a couple of pieces gone. Now, I have to admit, there is something to me that's deeply satisfying about that.
Yeah.
The bully getting smacked around.
Yeah.
But it's not my place to smack the bully around unless he comes to me and begs for it.
Right.
But if you have strength, that's what chivalry was all about.
Yeah.
Chivalry was about using your strength to protect the weak, not abuse them.
Yeah.
When you see someone weaker than yourself, you should feel a protective instinct.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than smacking around this autistic kid, the individual in question should have been doing his best to help him. And to admit to himself that it's a stress reliever. You know, that's about as chivalrous as punching grandma and taking her purse.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine Sir Lancelot doing that? Out of the way, grandma, I'm out for a night on the town. Guinevere needs some booze. You know, no. So, we all have to struggle with these things. And some of us are by nature more brutal than others. But the good news is that to the degree that we're able to overcome them, the more merit there is. Because obviously you don't get any merit at all for not being tempted by something. You know, if I tell you I've never been tempted to steal a truck, and I always refrain from stealing trucks, you know how much merit I get for that?
Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
I could show you tons of trucks I never stole or ever will. And I can tell you one. Thank you, Lord. That's what I needed, that approbation. Yeah. Good on you, Charles.
Good on you, Charles.
All those unstolen trucks.
Yeah.
So, translate this into online. When you're dealing with people, ladies and gentlemen, and I use those words hoping that they're to be meant, ladies and gentlemen, don't snap. Don't bite. And if you want to pick a fight, be brave. Pick it with somebody bigger than you are. See what happens. I can guess. But you never know. Look at, as Sport and Life tells us about David and Goliath. David was small, but oh my. David was small, but oh my. When he was done with Goliath, he lay down and died. David was small, but oh my.
All right. Let's see. We got one final question today. Okay, but it's a really good one from TC. This is definitely one for you, Charles. He says, "Greetings, fellas. My mother was born shortly after Charles in the early 60s. Was born out of wedlock when she was barely finished with high school. Was brought up in the cringy JP2 felt banner years. Spent a good deal of my 20s as a C&E Catholic. Actually,
Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, I had to look that one up. Christmas and Easter. And had to read my way into truly understanding and practicing the faith in my 30s. In any case, my mother, like so many people born in the 60s and the 80s, I wonder why he skipped 70s, was very...
Because he's afraid of Oswald Dupree. Everyone leaves the 70s to Oswald. They don't want to tangle with Oswald. Too much polyester.
So
they're afraid they'll go up in flames like a pile of double-knit slacks.
So many people between the 60s and 80s, was very poorly...
I like the first version better.
Yeah. Was very poorly catechized and is what one may charitably refer to as a lapsed Catholic. It pains me that she is somewhat obstinate in her reluctance to reversion. She lives out of state, joins my family and I at Mass when she is in town to visit, but isn't a regular Mass attendee. I'm having a hard time convincing her to go to confession, attend Mass regularly, and get herself in good stead with the church. It is a tough spot to be in, trying to lead your own parents back to the faith. Any suggestions beyond the obvious? Books perhaps that you know of that may help motivate adult reversion. Much obliged for any advice you may have.
Well, this is kind of a touchy spot for me because, in a certain sense, my entire career as a quote-unquote public Catholic arose because of this very issue.
Your parents?
No, not my parents, my peers. His mother is a peer of mine,
Oh, okay.
or a peeress in this case, a peeress in her own right,
Okay.
able to sit in the House of Lords by the Lords Reform Act of 1963. No. Anyway, but she is a peer of mine. So what I would say is several things. Of course, it's very difficult for you to try to reform your mom because she changed your diapers. You know, she brought you into the world, she sustained you, she fed you, and everything you might try to push at her is conditioned by that fact. However, I do have one recommendation, and believe it or not, I'm not just trolling for customers. You might send her my first book, Every Man Today Call Rome, E.T. Call Rome. And it's simply because it was addressed to my peers, to everybody born after 56. And the first sentence is, we were all robbed, which I think sums up the book, really. It did make a number of converts when it came out, and every now and then continues to. So I would recommend it to her, get it and give it to her. I mean, you can read it yourself. Don't feel afraid. But she needs, and failing that, and whether or not you do that, see if you can find some Catholics her own age in your circle whom you might make sure are around when she comes by again for her to socialize with. Because they'll be able to speak to her in a way that you simply can't. On two things. One, she won't have nursed them, she won't have changed their diapers, etc. But also, being of roughly the same age, they'll have had a lot of the same experiences in a way that you just haven't. And, they have. So the things that put her out of the church and turned her off, which I'm sure she can't really explain to you, even if she wanted to, even if she tried to. Any friends of yours that age who are practicing will be able to relate to, unless they're converts. They will be able to relate to, and they will be able to possibly get her to see things in a different light. So that would be my advice.
There's one important revelation. I think it's really, really important to mention this because this is...
green scapular. Make sure she has one.
Green scapular. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Can't get that.
Because I've been, in California, I've really, there's so many people I love out here so much, but it's California, right? So, dude, yeah. So it's a right place for evangelization and stuff, and just reaching out. And so I just wanted to give a bit about expectations in general when you're evangelizing and when you're reaching out, and it's when you want someone else to improve. First, think of how hard it has been for God to improve you.
Yeah.
I have been utterly and inescapably surrounded by incredibly devout Catholics. and I had the best parents, and I've screwed up so hard for so long. And so then, as I'm evangelizing and I'm like, oh, why isn't this person doing the things that I'm saying? And then you're like, well, I picture God facepalming and thinking like, well, it took 30 years for you or whatever. So
what are you talking about? When you were 19 years old, you were the most perfect example of... I'm sorry, never mind.
No.
I withdraw the intervention.
Yeah. So, how long did it take you? And then So basically, think of how long it took you to get to the place where, well, and you're probably not going to be even the place you want to be. So now double or triple or whatever that, because I think St. Vincent Ferrer says, as an act of humility, always reflect on all the graces that you've been given.
Yeah.
And as an act of charity, assume that person hasn't been given the graces that you've been given.
Which is quite possible.
Right?
And another thing that comes to mind, you mentioned reading your way back in. Look at some of the stuff you read and see if you're knowing your mother as you do, which is probably better than I do, oddly enough, despite the fact that we're roughly the same age, though I am somewhat older. Try to think whether or not any of the books you read might have an impact on her.
You know, those are some of the most interesting conversion stories that I've heard from people in terms of what book and what thought gets people back into the faith. I remember for Soul on Church, she had written about this. The person that got her into the Catholic faith was actually Jean-Paul Sartre.
Well, there you go.
Because she saw the whole in it, because he's an absolute free will guy.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of philosophical, and she realized that it's like, no, you're wrong, and the gap that you're wrong in is God's will.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's a journey that each journey is so specific to that person.
It is, and it's both a joy and a mystery.
Yeah.
And of course, pray a lot for your mom. And make sure she knows how much you love her. And make sure that she knows that your loving her is part of your faith. The two are not unconnected. And of course, she sounds, you say you were born out of wedlock shortly after she was in high school. She was a heroine for keeping you around. You didn't join the ranks of the great infanticide. Every time you see a woman in difficult circumstances, unwed with a child, remember she's a heroine today because she could have killed it. And everybody would have praised her, All the driveling, murmuring mouths would have said she was wonderful. The only thing that would have said otherwise would have been her own conscience. And so she chose to have you. So she's a heroine. In fact, if you haven't already, you might thank her for that very fact. Certainly she lived up to the Church's teaching on the value of life. In your case, thank God. I'm glad you're here to tell the tale, as they say. I had a roommate in college who was extremely pro-life. I've always been pro-life, but he was like militant. I wanted to ask him why, and he said, why? I'll tell you why. It's because I'm illegitimate. And I know what my mother must have thought, at least at one point.
Right.
And, I thought to myself, that was when I was really brought face to face with the thing. In the sense that I thought of how much poorer my life had been if I hadn't known him. Because to this day, he's a very dear friend of mine. And the thought of not having in my life, to say nothing of his wife and kidlet, that would not be fun. And so that really made it real to me in a way. Mind you, at this point, I'm like 17 years old. But it made it real to me in a way that it hadn't been over the previous 5 years. I being 12 when Roe v. Wade emerged from the mouth of hell. I'm sorry, the Supreme Court. I tend to confuse the two. Washington, D.C., Hellmouth. You be the judge. Anyway, on other notes, guess what's coming up a week from today, when we'll actually be doing the show, because we can't do it September 7th. So we'll be doing it September 8th. But what is September 8th?
I don't know this one. This better be good. This better not be like Law Day or something.
One tries, ladies and gentlemen. One tries through the long, lonely decades. One tries. It's the birthday of Our Lady.
Oh, is it?
September 8th.
Okay.
When is the Immaculate Conception?
The Immaculate Conception? That's December
8th.
8th, yeah.
September 8th, December 8th. Get the connection.
It's 9 months?
Yeah. And 9 months after March 25th is December 25th.
Right.
But see, March 25th is the oldest Christian feast, going back to the 2nd century, the 100s.
Okay.
But what's 9 months from...
Yeah, Christmas, right. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, but we know that he couldn't have been born on December 25th. Because people in, less than 200 years after his death were celebrating the feast of his incarnation, of his conception.
Yeah.
9 months before the assumed date, the claimed date of his birthday. But we know that can't be, because we have a lot of people today who say it can't be.
Yeah. Of course. Right. I'm writing that down. Right. It can't be December 20th.
Can't be 20. It could be any other day.
Yeah.
Could be April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
So similarly, Our Lady's Immaculate Conception was on December the 8th.
Yeah.
So her birthday is
Got
on
it.
September the 8th.
There you go. Okay.
You're a math major.
No, I'm a business major.
Whatever. And that's not all. Because we'll be in the month of September, although it's given many different, 3 different themes. One of them is the month of the Holy Angels. And do you know why that is?
Because, I don't know. September is...
29th, the feast of St. Michael.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I mean, okay, Feast of St. Michael, yeah.
Okay, we good with that?
Yeah, we're good with that.
All right. And you know what else is going to be happening in the month of September?
What?
Halloween displays are going to get bigger and bigger and more elaborate.
Yep. That's for sure. Did you have your pumpkin spice latte?
Not yet. But I saw them. I went to get iced tea at Starbucks. And guess what?
What?
They have them.
Yeah.
I haven't had it yet, though.
Delicious.
I will, between now and the next show.
All right.
Sunday the 8th, I'll have had my first pumpkin spice latte.
Beautiful.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, these are the important things that drive some of the greatest theological minds in the world today.
All right, with that, I have one question for you. What is it if it's Monday?
Don't, please. I don't work with an app, please. Off the menu.
But what about the soul you save?
It may be, just may be, your own. Dun, dun, dun.
See you next time, everyone.
God bless all.